Have you ever been taught that the Book of Jubilees contains pretty much identical information to Genesis? Ever heard that they are just so much the same that you really don't need to study them together? If so, then this video is meant for you because they have some real important differences that you need to know about. While they cover the same time period of history and the same people groups, they don't always tell the same story. In fact, some of the stories are really in conflict to one another. I've benefited so greatly in my personal studies from comparing them that today I'm going to share with you my Cliff Notes version summary of the differences. I hope you enjoy this Numbering the Days style review of the facts so you can do your own research and come to your own informed opinion. Let's get started. Okay, so here we are in the all-familiar Numbering the Days PDF style study. The PDF is available upon request. See the description for information. And as I mentioned in the introduction, this is just a summary of my studies. And when I started on the path, I heard all those kind of things, that Jubilees is great, but it's just like Genesis, or you don't need to study it, or I kept hearing things like in videos like, because I watched all of the videos on Jubilees that I could, things like, see on this topic too, Genesis and Jubilees, they agree yet again on everything. And everything that this one percenter kept saying over and over, it was like trying to hypnotize people into his incorrect point of view of everything's just the same, don't worry about it. So I went in and I tested this for myself, and the results differed greatly from all the videos that I watched on this subject. I don't know if you've watched many of them, but I've watched practically every one that I could find before I decided to just study it for myself. So had to ask myself, what is it that they don't want me to understand? I mean, I don't know if you've ever asked yourself that question, but I have. And you can form your own opinion today after you watch this video and go and test it for yourself. Because I really hope to inspire more study in this area. Because Isaiah wrote in 8:20, to the Torah and to the testimony, if they speak not according to this word, it's because there's no light in them. And in Jubilees 1:4, it says, and Moses was on the mount for 40 days and 40 nights, and Yahuwah taught him the earlier and the latter history of the division of the days of the Torah and the testimony. I just finished a video last week on exactly what does the seed of Abraham do. And that too was a document from my studies, so I hope you watch that video. If you haven't, I know you'll enjoy it, especially if you enjoy this one. Today's video is going to go a lot more in depth and last longer. It's going to be a longer video. Now, I assume that the readers of this text, or the people who are watching this video, are mature in their walk and understand that the condition of the word we have has been corrupted to some extent. We were all warned of this by numerous prophets throughout time. So any passages that have no second witness to them might be highlighted in pink or may not be correct. I don't know. We are unable to discern this and prove it out. This is a dynamic document that I update over time as I do more studies. This is a summary. It's only going to show the differences of things that I think are important. I didn't summarize all of Jubilees and Genesis are not in this document. This is the one. These are the things that I thought are most important to bring out. The chapter numbers that you're going to see in the middle column are all from Jubilees, and the table summaries are arranged by person or subject. As you read this, consider the impression that each book is giving the reader on the character, actions, and reputations of the people or the subject matter. Ask yourself, if you consider Jubilees as scripture, what impact might it have on your understanding of the kingdom of Yah and the path of righteousness? Parents teach their children the rules and expectations of their home, and Yah is no different. How are the differences impacting what you as a child of Elohim believe and walk out? What is the truer or the real ancient path? One major difference that is not noted in this summary is that Jubilees' dating of the events is very extensive and ties to the biblical calendar in a manner that Genesis does not. This is all through this document. And if you watch our channel and subscribe to it and watch the weekly calendar episodes, you'll know that we pull a lot of events, or we're able to, from the Book of Jubilees into the calendar. Okay, I believe the comparison below shows much about the Book of Genesis versus the Book of Jubilees. It will make you pause, hopefully, and consider what you have been taught most all your life, and start to question what the scribes, teachers, publishers put together and have transmitted to us in the Book of Genesis. This is not to disrespect the efforts made by so many to honor and preserve the word of Yah at all. And I am not saying that the word is not true. I know it is. It's just that I can see some people have not translated everything, or they've glossed over words, or they've only given you a summary of the meaning of what the text can say. When I did study Jubilees and Genesis together, there are some real conflicts. So one of the books is wrong. I mean, there's some things that are just so different that both can't be true, and you're going to see them as I go through this list. So I don't mean disrespect to anybody and the scribes. I mean, I wouldn't be here today studying this, and we wouldn't be talking about it if a lot of scribes did do a lot of good work throughout history. But I do believe that the truth matters, and that's why I'm doing this. Now, there are sections of prophecy within the Book of Jubilees that I really don't see anybody speaking to, and I don't understand why. It's a shame. The Ruach HaKodesh spoke through many blessings being passed down generation to generation that I don't hear anyone discussing either. And if you pay attention, you'd also be asking, where are the other books that were written? Where is the end of the Book of Jubilees that's missing? And that's my opinion after looking at the end of the Book of Jubilees and at the front that says what time frame this book was supposed to cover. It's obvious that something's missing. So get your cup of coffee or your favorite drink, relax, and I'll be reading to you what I found. Okay. So we've got this chart we're going to go down through. And I put like missing in one of the columns if what is transmitted in one of the book, and some things are not in Jubilees, so you're going to see the missing word in both columns, but just that it's not there. And the chapter, like I said, the chapter here in the middle is from the Book of Jubilees. I have not given you chapter and verse of Genesis. At some point, people have to put in their own time and effort to study. And so get out your Book of Genesis, take this chart, and compare them yourself. That's what I'm trying to inspire people to do. Like I said, these are just my cliff notes from when I did it. I wanted to see the big picture. This is what I came up with. Okay. Abraham in chapter 11 of Jubilees is defeating the ravens and teaching people how to sow seed and secure it from the enemy. So I thought about the parable of the sower and the seed. And who better to sow your word, because Abraham was chosen, remember, to carry on the covenant. Who better to sow your word than someone who knows how to protect it in the first place, how to protect the seed, how to protect the people, and is willing to teach others. Okay, also in this chapter, Abram separates himself from his father so as not to worship his idols, and prayed for deliverance from the Creator as a young man. That's not even told in Genesis. And that was the video that we did on who actually spoke the first prayer for deliverance. We brought this out in that video. Chapter 12. Abram has great insight and understands that idols are a shame to those who worship them. In chapter 12, Abraham burns all his father's idols and everything that was a part of vain worship. That's actually taught in what's considered the Torah of Moses. Later on, it was that the idols and stuff were to be burned, and here is Abram doing it a long time before that. Okay, so that's why I said remind you of the Levites, the kinds of the Torah. You're going to be reminded of Torah quite a bit by what does the seed of Abraham actually do. Okay, and sometimes I'm going to place something that's in both books, because, when you're trying to merge two books together, you have to find places where they meet, and they both say the same thing sometimes, to do a chronology. Okay, again in chapter 12, things that are missing is Abraham looks up at the stars and understands that searching them out is not the answer. You don't get that impression in Genesis You get the impression from Genesis sometimes that he's told, oh, number the stars, and that Abraham would have been a big astronomer. And whether he may have been or not, he realizes that that's not it. That's not it. The answer's not there. And that this knowledge is of father and the culture he was born into. He was born into a family of idolatry, into a culture that worshiped the stars, that knew all about astronomy. So he's realizing in this chapter that that's not it. Okay. Also, Abram prays a deep. Again, he's praying his deep, heartfelt prayer. He chooses Yah. He's asking him for help, not to go astray, and to be delivered from his own deceitful heart. Abram asks, which directions does he go? What direction do I go? Do I go back to my kindred in Ur, or do I stay where he is? He's asking for help. In Genesis, we're given the impression that Yah just picks Abraham out of nowhere, unprompted, and says, "Get up and go. I'm gonna choose you out of the blue. Here, I'm gonna send you." Whereas in Jubilees, Yah's responding to Abram's prayer and says, "Go." I mean, it's all in response to what Abram did. So it's big difference in the impression that you get of who Abraham is and how Yahuwah picked him. Okay, in Jubilees, Yah tells Abram that he will be his sovereign ruler to him and his seed forever. At this point, Abraham is taught the heavenly language and reads the books that are passed down from the fathers and received understanding. And this is totally missing in Genesis. I mean, think about all the teachers out there who were teaching when the Hebrew language came to be and how it came to be. And if you believe the Book of Jubilees, then here you have to understand that it existed in Abraham's reading, like the book of the writings of Enoch and Noah that were passed down. Okay. Next in Jubilees comes Abram telling Sarai to lie with him about who she is and say she is his sister for fear of being killed. Now that's just not in Jubilees. And in later on, this is when they went down to Egypt. For the sake of Sarah, Pharaoh deals well with Abram, implying Pharaoh gives Abram wealth, or that Abram would profit off his family in this manner. And in the Book of Jubilees, it's just such a contrast. Abram and Sarah dwell in the land, receiving absolutely nothing for 5 years. So whatever wealth they had, they went there with, and she's seized by Pharaoh. She's abducted by him after 5 years. And in the Book of Jubilees, Yahuwah is clearly the one doing the plagues in response to Sarai being seized. I mean, that's why the plagues happened. And over in Genesis, Pharaoh lays fault for the plagues on Abram for lying about Sarah. I mean, you understand, I put this in pink because I thought it was pretty important. I mean, we get a totally different impression of the character of Abram out of this section here. You know, are he and Sarah liars? And is Pharaoh mad because they lied to him? and he's making them wealthy? Or did they go down there, you know, because there was a famine and Sarah gets abducted? Because, you know, this is a type and shadow. If you follow along in our calendar studies in month 1, this story right here is a foreshadowing of the whole Exodus story, where the people are seized by the Egyptians and made into slaves. It's the same story. It's the being told through time. It started right here. Okay, now we get to Lot and Abraham. Now in the book of Genesis, Lot and Abraham's herds are too big to share the same area. And the herdsmen are at odds and there's strife. And Abram says, "Oh, we've got to separate. You go choose what land you want." And in the Book of Jubilees, there is no strife. There are no issues. Lot leaves on his own for Sodom because he wants to go there. And the text mentions that the men of Sodom were sinners. And Abraham was sad because he wanted to go there on his own. Big difference. Now, there's two promises that come to Abram after this event, and I'm not sure of all the prophetic significance of this. I'm not as big as prophecy person as my husband is, but in Genesis it says, "I will make your offspring as the dust of the earth," so that if one can count the dust of the earth, your offspring also can be counted. In Jubilees it says, "And I will make your seed as the sand of the sea. Though a man may number the dust of the earth, yet your seed shall not be numbered." I mean, these are pretty big differences. One says, if somebody can do something, your seed are going to be counted. And the other one says, I'm going to make your seed such that no one can number them. And I just want to point out that the numbering of the seed is mentioned a couple times in Jubilees, that shall not happen, which once you get to the story of King David and Hasatan prompting David to number the people, that it was considered such a grave sin. And here back in Jubilees it says that's not supposed to happen. Okay. Abram experienced a family separation. Isaac does too with Esau. They went from us because they were not of us. It comes to mind when from the New Testament, Yahusha, Jesus brings a sword that separates. Sodom was people meant for destruction. Okay, I know this. These are. I told you these are my cliff notes. So chew on that one. Okay, next entry. In Jubilees, Abram rescues Lot and all his possessions. He refuses the offer from the king of Sodom to keep anything for himself, so that he has nothing to tithe to anybody. He did not want booty from the rescue effort, and there is no Melchizedek and no bread and wine. In the book of Genesis is totally different. Abram rescues Lot and his possessions and other possessions and peoples. When he meets up with the king of Sodom, Melchizedek, king of Salem, comes with bread and wine to bless Abram. And he receives 10% of a tithe from Abram of the booty, because that's what it implies, is that Abram kept booty and he's giving it to the king of Salem. So these are really different. I mean, the character... the character that you see on one side is pretty different from the other. The Genesis account says, keeping booty from the spoils of war is an okay thing to do. Whereas the Book of Jubilees says, nuh-uh, if you're going to be Abram's seed, you don't keep booty from rescue efforts. Just ponder that one. Oh yeah, like I said, much has been made of this passage in doctrines and priesthoods and all kinds of stuff. And that's why I said it's really sad to me that these are not discussed. Okay, in chapter 14 of Jubilees, you can see down at the bottom of the screen, there's a word that's highlighted. I cannot find it anywhere on any search engine whatsoever. And if you've ever seen that word anywhere, it would be, please comment on it, because I think it was kind of interesting that of all these places that are going to be turned over to Abraham's seed, there's something that you can't find. Okay, chapter 14. A covenant is made, and Genesis, it's the same covenant. These scriptures line up. But what was interesting is that in the Book of Jubilees, it does note that the offering was completely consumed by the fire on the altar, and that's not mentioned in Genesis. The other thing about this event in the books is that the covenant of Noah was being renewed with Abraham, and the pieces were cut in half, and he was receiving the promises. And it says clearly in Genesis that Abraham was renewing the festival of Shavuot. And the covenant with Noah was being renewed with Abraham, and this is totally missing from Genesis, which, like anything in Jubilees that says something was happening on these major feast dates, that's all throughout the Book of Jubilees. Genesis never mentions that, even though it'll have the same story. It never tells you when it's happening, because it doesn't Everything is skewed to where everything started with Moses. And I'm not discounting the Exodus and nothing about it. It's just that things, if you believe the Book of Jubilees, things didn't start in the Exodus story. They started way before that, and it's been repeating through time. Okay, so now we get to something pretty significant because in the book of Genesis, Sarai blames her barrenness on Yahuwah and tells Abram to go into her servant Hagar so that she can obtain seed from her. Now, in the book of Jubilees, Abram believes that he will have seed, and all it says is that Sarai does not bear. And Sarai gives Hagar to Abram without blaming a person, anyone. There's no blame, and yet in the book of Genesis, there's blame. She's blaming God because she hadn't had a baby yet. So this story makes Sarai into someone who's blaming Yah. Okay, then when Sarai knew, this is a Genesis, that Hagar had conceived, then Hagar is looking at Sarai with contempt. And Sarai then tells Abram, the wrong that's been done to her be on Abram, and Yah be the judge. And then she deals harshly with Hagar. Well, that's just not even in the book of Jubilees. So this is almost a character attack on Sarai, if Genesis has, been adding to the story. Okay. Then we have Hagar, who is a victim in this story. She runs off into the desert and receives a blessing from Yah, who tells her that her son will be great, and now go return to your mistress for now. Your mistress. Well, that's not in the book of Jubilees. And as you read this, a detailed comparison, ponder how Jubilees only focuses on Yah's chosen people in the story and does not spend time in the book of Jubilees and the text on other people such as Hagar, Esau, or Edom. Those people are not in they're mentioned in Jubilees, but their stories are not told, their genealogies are not there. It's not there. Okay, we're going to chapter 15. Now the covenant of circumcision was received, and the celebration was at the feast of Shabbaoth. The dating of this is missing from Genesis. Also, when it talks about what the covenant is in the book of Jubilees, it adds that this is for an everlasting covenant, so that I may be your sovereign ruler over you and your seed after you. Those words are not in Genesis. Okay, so in one text, he is your Elohim, he's your God, and the other, you are circumcised because he is your sovereign ruler. And this has meaning later on for tabernacles. Okay, we'll go into that later. Okay, another thing that's missing from Genesis that I thought was important is that circumcision is also the rule of Yahuwah's kingdom in heaven. The angels are circumcised. Okay, so that piece of information is missing from Genesis. And Yahuwah, it goes on in Jubilees to say, Yahuwah has placed spirits in authority over the nations that are going to end up leading them away from him, and that Yahuwah alone is the sovereign ruler over Abraham and his seed. And this is emphasized in Jubilees quite a bit. And Abraham and Sarah and his descendants celebrate this very point all the time. Think about the Tower of Babel, when El Elyon divided up the nations, and he assigned them to the sons of Elohim who were going to rule over them. And then you've got Psalm 82 and the Council of Elohim. So in Jubilees, none of those sons of Elohim are ruling over Abram and his people. Okay. So chapter 16. We're getting to where Sarah is told she's going to have a baby. And in the book of Genesis, it says, "And the way of women had ceased to be with Sarai. So Sarah laughed to herself, saying, After I am worn out and my Lord is old, shall I have pleasure? And in the book of Jubilees, Sarah laughs when she hears that she will have a son, And that's all she does, is she just laughs. And she's soon admonished and says no more. She doesn't go off and with any kind of snarky comments. Okay, Abraham and Sarah feed 3 men before they travel to Sodom, and that story is missing from the Book of Jubilees. I mean, Sodom and Gomorrah happens, but the whole thing about the 3 men showing up, and the whole story about, oh, if there's 50 men left, will you destroy the place? Oh, if there's 40 men left, you remember that all that section is not in the Book of Jubilees. In the book of Genesis, Yahuwah is reported as saying he will not hide things he is doing from Abraham, and he must go to see if the reports to him are true about Sodom's behavior. That is not in the book of Jubilees. And to me, this makes it sound like Yahuwah can't trust those who report to him upon his own throne above. He can't trust the report, so he's got to come down here and see for himself. I just thought that was interesting. Okay, in Jubilees, there's a warning that Yahuwah will execute the same judgment upon any place that does the same wickedness as Sodom. That is missing from the book of Genesis. There was a big warning in the book of Jubilees. Okay, and here's all these things here, about the story of Sodom and Gomorrah that are not in the book of Jubilees. Lot's bargaining with the 2 angels to save a small city and let him flee there instead of the mountain, he was told, because he was afraid of that. That's not in there. Lot's wife turning into a pillar of salt is missing from Jubilees. The entire section where the daughters say there's no men left and they plot to get their father drunk and sleep with him, that's not in the book of Jubilees either. What is in the book of Jubilees is it says, and he, Lot, and his daughters committed sin upon the earth, such as there had not been on the earth since the days of Adam till his time, for the man lay with his daughters. And I thought that was, I don't know if Jubilees has been changed, but I thought to myself, man, with all the wickedness that went on in the time of Noah, before then, you would have thought this kind of sin would have been happening, but Jubilee says it hadn't happened until then, and I wondered if it actually said something else, and I don't know. I don't know. What do you think? Sometimes I just wonder about stuff. But in the book of Jubilees, there was no, I realize I haven't put it over here on the screen, but there was no offering of daughters to be raped by a crowd of men pounding on a door either. So, okay, now we go, continuing on in the comparison, we get to another story where Abraham and Sarah lie again about their being a sister to Abimelech, king of Gerar, and Sarai is admonished by Yahuwah. Abimelech is mad at Abraham for lying to him and what they have done to him, and vindicates Sarah by giving her wealth. Okay. This entire story is missing from Jubilees. Again, we've got Abraham and Sarah being cast as liars. Okay, in chapter 16, the angels visit Abraham at the well of the oath, and Sarah conceives. And that is missing from the book of Genesis. In the story, again, about Sarah, it says, God has made laughter for me. Everyone who hears will laugh over me. Okay, where Sarah is almost sounds like she's mocking. And this whole thing about her name and laughter and Isaac, all that is missing from the book of Jubilees. Okay, moving on. Abram, this is in Jubilees and missing from Genesis. Abraham is visited by angels at tabernacles and is informed he will have 6 more sons, and that his Kodesh seed through Isaac will not be reckoned with the Gentiles, for they shall belong to the Most High, for his possession above all nations, and that it should become a kingdom of priests and a Kodesh nation. Okay, that's missing out of Genesis. Also missing out of Genesis, he built booths for his family and servants, and was the first on the earth to celebrate tabernacles. And he blessed and rejoiced, and he called the name of the festival of Yah, a joy acceptable to the Most High. This is ordained on the heavenly tablets and to be a statute forever for Yasharel. So here we are. Stuff is missing from Genesis. Again, it's all about the feast keeping and celebration and where tabernacles came from Abraham. Okay, now we have some stuff that I thought was important again that's missing in Jubilees. Abimelech is making a treaty with Abraham that Abraham will not treat him or his descendants with dishonesty. That's missing from Jubilees. When an issue, when an issue arises about a well, Abimelech and Abraham make a covenant, and Abraham gives him 7 ewe lambs as a witness. That's missing from Jubilees. Chapter 17, Abram is being tested on many things by Yah and found faithful. And Mastema, or you could say Hasatan, wants Abraham tested again to see if he would sacrifice his son. Now this conversation that's in the Book of Jubilees is not in Genesis, and it is kind of similar to what you read about in the Book of Job. Now, chapter 18, Abraham calls the place that he took Isaac to, and it was said that Yahuwah has seen, he called that place Mount Zion. In the book of Genesis it says, so Abraham called the name of that place the Lord will provide. As it was said to this day, on the mount of the Lord it shall be provided. So the books differ here. Moving on in chapter 18. Okay, this is after Isaac. In Jubilees it says, in part of the blessing, that your seed shall inherit the cities of his enemies. And in Genesis it says, and your offspring shall possess the gate of his enemies. It may or may not be a significant difference, but I thought it was worth mentioning, especially things when it comes to prophecy. Okay, something that's missing totally from Genesis is the sacrifice of Isaac takes place on the calendar day of Pesach, and he celebrated this festival every year. He celebrates basically what becomes known as unleavened bread 7 days with joy, and he called it the festival of Yah, according to the 7 days which he went and returned in Shalom. I mean, this is something we pointed out in our studies when we talk in our video about the Feast of Unleavened Bread, or even in the calendar week, that Abraham is celebrating a 7-day feast in month 1 that later becomes labeled as the Feast of Unleavened Bread during the Exodus. Okay. This is very minor. Abram is told news of births to distant relatives, and that's missing in Jubilees. Okay, now in Jubilees it says Sarah dies and Abram is tested during this event on his patience, and Yah gave him free unmerited favor before all who saw him. That's missing from Genesis. Because now we're talking about the character of Yah. Okay, Abram is recorded as a friend of Yah on the heavenly tablets because he does not speak at all about how the land was promised to him during the time he buys the burial area for Sarah's graves from the Hittites. So that's kind of interesting to me, that's missing from Genesis. Genesis goes on later in the book in chapter 19 of Jubilees. Genesis is going on for paragraphs of information about the servant of Abram going to Bethel to search for a bride for Isaac. I mean, that whole story is just a couple of sentences in the Book of Jubilees. In the book of Genesis, it gives lots of details on Isaac when he first sees Rebekah and he takes her into Sarah's tent. That's not in the Book of Jubilees. In Genesis, there's details on how Abram gave his possessions away to Isaac and servants. It goes into how Abraham was buried in Genesis. Jubilees does not have this event occurring until many later chapters, and it gives lots more of details than Genesis does. Now, there's some places where the two books do not line up, even in the chronology of things. And this is where we get into one of those places. Because Genesis goes on and gives lots of details of all the people born to Ishmael, which Jubilees does not. Rebecca is barren until Isaac prays to Yahuwah and her womb is opened. That is missing in the Book of Jubilees. The story of the two children struggling in her womb, and Yah tells her that there's two different nations inside of her and who's going to serve whom, that's missing from Jubilees. Afterward, his brother came out with his hand holding Esau's heel, and so his name was called Jacob, which means you're a supplanter. That's not in the Book of Jubilees. And I already did a word study on the name of Jacob or Jacob. It doesn't mean heel supplanter. Okay. Now, in the Book of Jubilees, all this stuff is there, but it's missing in Genesis. As the youths grew, Jacob learned to write, just like Abraham did. Remember? Esau did not learn, for he was a man of the field and a hunter, and he learned how to war, and all his deeds were fierce. So, Jubilees is talking about the character of the two boys, and it's obvious when you start to read this that Jacob is a lot like Abraham. Not that Abraham didn't also go and do battle, because he rescued Lot. But their personalities, Esau and Jacob's personalities were very different, and Esau did not care to learn how to read, which means he would never be able to read all the books that were passed down coming from Enoch and Noah down through Abraham. I mean, Esau's not a reader. He doesn't care. Okay, also in the Book of Jubilees, Abraham observed the deeds of Esau and Jacob and commands, this is Abraham, observed the deeds of Esau and Jacob and commands Rebekah to watch over Jacob. He knows Yahuwah will choose Jacob. Yahuwah will choose Jacob to receive the blessing, not Esau, and asks for her help. I mean, this part is just profound in the stories and the sermons that I've heard about Jacob and Rebekah and conniving and the character difference is just stark. So and Abraham says, and all the blessings wherewith Yahuwah has blessed me and my seed shall belong to Jacob and his seed always. Just, this is not in Genesis, but boy, Jubilees just reads so much differently. And Abraham gives the blessing to Jacob directly. Long before Isaac did anything, Abraham has already blessed Jacob. So, don't you think Rebekah might have panicked when Isaac says he's going to bless Esau? Because Abraham's already blessed Jacob. And it says, and the spirits, this is Abraham talking to Jacob, and the spirits of Mastema shall not rule over you or over your seed to turn you from Yah, who is your sovereign ruler from henceforth forever. This is just huge. I mean, I hope you just go over this and let it all sink in. And when people tell you, oh, there's no differences between the two books, it's just baloney. Okay, Abraham teaches the Torah to all his sons. He's teaching what you could come to think of as Torah from Moses to all his sons. Everyone is expected to hear to very high standards in chapter 20. And in chapter 21, there's an entire chapter full of Abraham teaching priestly Torah, the Levitical Torah, to Isaac and blessing him. It's not identical word for word, but boy, does it sure make you think of Leviticus when you read that chapter. Okay, yeah, and I wanted to point out, so you get the impression from Jubilees and an understanding that the Levitical high standards of behavior and the priestly duties were being taught and observed long before, without a temple and without a paid priesthood. Okay, chapter 22. Isaac and Ishmael come to the well of the oath and celebrate the feast of Shabuah, the feast of weeks. They get along well. You don't hear that in Genesis. Jacob goes to see Abraham, and they celebrate the feast also. Abraham gives additional blessings to Jacob, including all the blessings of Noah and his fathers. That's not in Genesis. Then Abraham says, this house have I built for myself, that I might put my name upon it in the earth. It is given to you and to your seed forever. And it will be named the house of Abraham. It is given to you and to your seed forever, for you to build my house and establish my name before Yah. Your seed and your name will stand throughout all the generations of the earth. Now this is told to Isaac only. Once you study the language and learn about the word house, it opens up this more. What house did Abraham build for himself? Did he build physical tabernacles and temples? No. That's why learning the language can be so eye-opening. Okay, chapter 22 still. Abraham prays to Yah to bless Isaac and his seed forever. That's not in Genesis. Details on all the mourning and the burial of Abraham. There's a bunch of details there that are not in Genesis. Okay, given that Jubilees gives us all the prayers and the blessings from Abraham, it is a striking contrast to how little is said about Abraham, that everyone wants to hold him up as their father. But boy, you read Jubilees and you see why, you want to say, my father Abraham. Okay, chapter 23, going forward. The longevity of humans was shortened much after Abraham's death due to their wickedness. That's not in Genesis. Okay, now we're getting into prophecy area, this aqua color in the background. The end times prophetic prophecy on what will happen in the end days is in the Book of Jubilees, chapter 23. And it says, verse 21, and those who have escaped shall not return from their wickedness to the way of righteousness, but they shall all exalt themselves in deceit and wealth, that they may each take all that is their neighbor's. And they shall name the great name of Yahuwah, but not in truth and not in righteousness. And they shall defile the Kodesh of Ha-Kodeshim with their uncleanness and the corruption of their pollution. So many people want to study prophecy and yet are never exposed to this, or they read this and they choose to ignore it in the Book of Jubilees. So when you study the language, be sure to research out for yourself the phrase, the Kodesh of Ha-Kodeshim, and realize that what I put here in yellow, and they shall name the great name, but not in truth and not in righteousness. That's our times, folks. Going on in verse 22. And a great punishment shall befall the deeds of this generation from Yah, and he will give them over to the sword and to judgment and to captivity and to be plundered and devoured. It goes on, and you can read it. You can see it here on the screen. And they shall use violence against Yasharel and transgression against Yaakov. Towards the end of chapter 23, there's prophecy of victory and overcoming for the righteous, and that sinners will be handed over to them. And I wrote to myself, pondered what group this is occurring to and how his name is being blasphemed. And I wondered if this may relate to Revelation chapter 13. Some of what it has said is a second, third, and fourth witness if you read all the prophets. Okay, going on to chapter 24. In the Book of Jubilees, the context is given of why Esau is selling his birthright for red pottage. It's in Jubilees. There was a big famine in the land. That context of why Esau might have been prompted, or he might have been really hungry for what Jacob had, is missing. Okay, maybe Esau couldn't find any more animals because there's a big famine and they're all dead and he's starving. So he goes to his brother who grew some plants. Okay, I think that's kind of big. If you don't have the context for things, then it makes it sound like Jacob's just scheming to get things from Esau instead of feeding him because he's really starving. Okay, in the red. When Isaac and Rebekah in the book of Genesis stay in Gerar and do not go to Egypt, they lie about Rebekah being his sister and not his wife. Later, Abimelech is very upset when he finds this out. This story is not in Jubilees. Again, we've got Isaac and Rebekah being liars like Abraham and Sarah, and that's just not Jubilees. Okay, in Jubilees chapter 24, Isaac is redigging wells that the Philistines stopped up when Abraham died, and he finds living water. That is missing from Genesis. But in Genesis, Isaac and Abimelech are making a pact. The details are hard for me to discern. And if anybody knows this story really well, I would really love some insight. Maybe we could chat about it in our community platform, because I have a hard time discerning this part. Or when we study the Book of Jubilees, somebody can help me. Okay. Isaac is cursing the Philistines and saying that they will be rooted out of the entire earth. And I thought that was pretty profound. And that's not in the book of Genesis, but it is in Jubilees. And I was trying to figure out, what did the Philistines do other than they apparently filled up all the wells of Abraham? Okay, in the book of Genesis, it has Isaac making a covenant and a feast for Abimelech, exchanging gifts, and it's all rosy. But in the book of Jubilees, he's cursing the Philistines, and I thought, boy, there's really something going on here. Again, I don't know where this is coming from. Okay, Jubilees chapter 25. In this entire chapter, we have Mother Rebecca giving Torah and blessings to Isaac and to his seed, and it also ends with a blessing of Mother Yahuwah upon him. That's right, Mother Yahuwah. She receives the Ruach in verse 14 and lays her hands on both of her sons and gives them blessings. It's interesting. Go study this one out for yourself. It's in English. In chapter 25, Jacob is to spread over all the earth, and that's missing from Genesis. Okay. Jacob also replies that he is in his 63rd year. He's 63 years old when he's talking to his mom, and has never been with a woman, even though Esau has pushed him to be. Now, when you compare the two books, you will be left with a really different impression of women and how they are treated, in addition to how men can be chaste. And Yahuwah has a feminine side. It's just profound things to see. Okay, this is in Jubilees, missing from Genesis. The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau. And he discerned him not, because it was a dispensation from heaven to remove his power of perception. And yet Isaac discerned it not, for his hands were hairy as his brother's Esau, so that we blessed him. Now remember, Abraham has already passed a blessing down to Jacob. And here, in the book of Jubilees, it says heaven's involved in making sure that Isaac thinks that Jacob is Esau. But no, we're supposed to blame conniving Rebecca and supplanter Isaac. Okay, continuing, there's a blessing over Isaac that says, and may all the blessings wherewith Yah has blessed me and blessed Abraham, my father, be imparted to you and to your seed forever. That's missing from Genesis. To Esau, and do shake his yoke from off your neck. You shall sin a complete sin unto death, and your seed shall be rooted out from under heaven. That Isaac spoke to Esau is missing in Genesis. But what is in Genesis is that Rebekah said to Isaac, I loathe my life because of the Hittite women. If Jacob marries one of the Hittite women like these, one of the women of the land, what good is my life to me? Okay, that's not in the book of Jubilees. And so if you understand the Torah as it has been given in Jubilees, and that marrying a Hittite woman would disqualify all his seed from the blessings, then this statement makes sense. But based upon what modern understanding we have, it appears to be an insult. So, again, it's all the same, folks. Just keep moving on. It's just saying the same thing. Okay, chapter 27. Rebekah is grieved when Jacob leaves to go to Laban, and Isaac has compassion, tenderness, and gentle words for his wife. Jubilees has many examples of healthy marriages. They're healthy marriages. We have a husband here who is actually caring for his wife and showing tenderness. You don't get that in Genesis. Okay, Esau in Genesis marries an Ishmaelite. That's missing from Genesis. Missing from Jubilees. What is in Jubilees is it says, it is evil in the eyes of Yahuwah to marry off the younger daughter before the elder one. That's in Jubilees, and that's not in Genesis. What we have in Genesis is every son that is born to Jacob is named by his mother with a short phrase. Now remember, all those when all the sons of Jacob are being named, these phrases spoken by the mothers in a biblical language are not the definitions of their names, folks. Yet that's what the dictionaries and concordances are showing you. Is that whatever pops out of the mother's mouth, well, that's what the boy's name means. Well, no, that's not true. Okay, chapter 28. In Jubilees, Jacob wants to leave after Joseph is born to give me my wives and sons and let me go to my father Isaac and let me make me a house. This is Jacob. And in Genesis it says Jacob wants to leave Joseph after Joseph is born to go home to my country. And these two are different. We're going back to making me a house in the house of Abraham. And he said, I built me a house. So study the language. Next, Laban says in Genesis, if I have found favor, Jacob is saying to Laban in Genesis, if I have found favor in your sight, I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you. Woo, doggies. And over in Jubilees it says, and Laban said to Jacob, tarry with me for your wages, and pasture my flock for me again, and take your wages. These two are just really different. Okay. Moving on, what's in Jubilees? And they agreed with one another that he should give him his wages, those of the lambs and the kids which were born black and spotted and white, and these were to be his wages. Not in the book of Genesis. In the book of Genesis, Jacob uses rods to turn sheep spotted so he will have abundant wages. Again, going back to the character. In Genesis, so my honesty will answer for me later. When you come to look into my wages with you, every one that is spotted and speckled among the goats and black among the lambs, if found with me, shall be counted stolen. That is not in the book of Jubilees. So, Jacob in the book of Jubilees increases greatly and becomes wealthy by hard work and blessing from Yah. But in the book of Genesis, Jacob increases greatly and becomes wealthy through lying and manipulation of the livestock garments, through other means. This entire chapter is full of character attacks. It's just astounding. Okay, I have here in yellow that the next several chapters appear to be the most corrupted, as they are vastly different, and one of the books is misleading. I'm not here as the expert to tell you which book is right on every point. These are my cliff notes, and I'm just sharing with you what I found. Okay? So in Genesis, now Jacob heard that the sons of Laban were saying, Jacob has taken all that was our father's, and from what was our father's he has gained all his will. So they're calling Jacob, he's being called a thief. And Jacob saw that Laban did not regard him with favor as before. Now see, all that's missing from Jubilees. In Genesis, Jacob tells his wives how their father has cheated him 10 times out of his wages and dealt deceitfully with them. And he tells them that Yah took away all their father's flocks and gave them to Jacob via the changing of their garments. Yahuwah tells Jacob in a dream to return to his father and land. The wives then go on a rant demeaning their father Laban. That's not in Jubilees. In Jubilees, Jacob tells his wives about his dreams and his vow to Yahuwah, and that it's time to leave peacefully. And that's not what it says in Genesis. Okay? And in Jubilees, Jacob leaves with his wives, flocks, and Laban is pursuing him. But in Genesis, it says that Yaakov is tricking Laban. Okay. In Genesis, Laban overtakes Jacob, and there is much strife, contention, insults, searching for stolen idols, and all kinds of stuff that's not in Jubilees. In Genesis, there's a long speech by Laban at Jacob that casts him as a mere servant who is at the mercy of his master and deserves punishment. Jacob is a slave who ran away with his master's possessions, and the text has Jacob betraying Laban. I mean, talk about character assassination, because none of that's in Jubilees. What's in Jubilees is an explanation by the angel who's telling the story to Moses about the Rephaim's wickedness and the Amorites that are there now, and Yahuwah's judgment against such practices. In the Book of Jubilees, Laban and Jacob make a covenant at Shavuos that neither should cross the mountain of Gilead to the other side with an evil purpose, and Jacob makes a feast for everyone. Now, in the book of Genesis, it's kind of the same, except it leaves out the dating of the event. They don't want you to know this is at Shavuos, when covenants and oaths are made. Okay, next, Jacob sends away Laban after the feast, and in Genesis, Laban is leaving on his own. Okay, so the two stories are pretty different and give you a much different impression about the parties involved. Okay, Genesis has chapters and multiple sections on the reconciliation with Esau. I mean, they're just so different. Okay, let's look at chapter 29 in Jubilees. It says, "And he passed over the Jabbok, or the Jordan River, in the 9th month, on the 11th thereof. And on that day Esau his brother came to him, and he was reconciled to him, and departed from him to the land of Seir. But Jacob dwelt in tents." Did you catch that date, folks? 9/11, the 9th month, on the 11th day. This aligns with Genesis 31:54, which has Jacob calling his brethren to break bread. The sacrifice usually was done with flesh, but they're breaking bread. Oh my, how the adversary came against this event in our time period, did it not? Look at the day and the month. Yaakov meets in Genesis with angels at El's camp. That's not in the Book of Jubilees. In the Book of Genesis, now we get to a section. See how much is missing? Or it's not missing, it's just not told in Jubilees. But this is the story that Genesis tells. Jacob sends messengers to Esau saying he's his servant, and he has returned with many goods to give him because he's afraid of Esau. Jacob prays to Elohim and says he's not worthy of protection. Please deliver me from the attack of Esau. I mean, there's just all this stuff that goes on. And this is where his name is changed to Israel. This is the night, he's struggling with an angel. This is not how Jubilees has the name changed, because it does say his name was changed, but this is not how it happens. I mean, either one of these stories is right or the other. You can decide for yourself which one you want to believe. Genesis goes on with Esau comes with 400 men, and Jacob and everyone bows down on the ground to Esau. But Esau said, "I have enough, my brother, keep things for yourself." And Jacob says, "Oh no, please, if I found favor in your sight, then accept my present from my hand, for I have seen your face, which is like seeing the face of God. And you have accepted me. Please accept my blessing that is brought to you, because God has dealt graciously with me, and because I have enough." Thus he urged him, and he took it. This is saying Esau took everything from Jacob. These stories are just so different. Okay? Then it goes on. Next, Jacob called him my lord and lies to him that he goes behind him and met him in Seir. Next, Genesis actually dates something to a feast. Get this. By having Jacob, now Israel, journey to Sukkot, and build tabernacles for his livestock. Therefore, he called the place Sukkot. Do you see the insult here, folks? Are you understanding? Abraham and Sarah had tabernacles. They built tabernacles for people. And in Genesis, they're building tabernacles for livestock. Okay. Now in Jubilees, and to his mother Rebekah also 4 times a year. This is Jacob taking care of his parents 4 times a year. This is on the 31st days of every 3 months. On that 31st day, 4 of them a year. This is when Jacob actually sends all the provisions for the next 3 months to his parents. He's taking care of his parents. What did the seed of Abraham do? Chapter 29. It goes on to say, for in the days when Jacob went to Mesopotamia, Esau took to himself a wife, the daughter of Ishmael, and he gathered together all the flocks of his father and his wives, and he went up and dwelt on the Mount Seir, and left Isaac his father at the well of the oath alone. I mean, look at the character picture that Jubilees is painting of Esau. He took everything away from his father that his father had. Jacob had just sent him stuff for the next 3 months, and Esau takes it away. So who stole what from whom? Okay. So in the story, we're getting to the story of Shechem and Dinah. Yaakov goes to Shechem and pitches a tent in Shalom. And in Genesis, Yaakov goes to Shechem and pitches a tent outside the city. And in Genesis it says, and from the sons of Hamor, Shechem's father, he brought forth 100 pieces of money, the piece or the price of land on which he had pitched his tent. There he erected an altar, and he called it Eloi Israel. Okay, that's not in Jubilees. Okay, next comes a story that is really different too. This is the story of Dinah. So I won't read all through here, but basically it's very different. Dinah's going out with the women of the land. They're going out to see the women of the land, and Genesis does admit that they seized her, but they want to say that the men who took her, his soul was drawn to Dinah, the daughter of Jacob. He loved Dinah and spoke tenderly to her and all this stuff. And Jubilees makes it apparent that a 12-year-old girl was abducted. Period. That's what happened. And over in Genesis, there's all this stuff here about, oh, we want to make marriages with you, and give us your daughters, and take our daughters for yourselves, and dwell and trade with us and all this property. And when I looked at the words, when I was looking through here at the biblical language, these words appeared to refer to human and sex. See the things down here on the screen? And this here on the screen? Things that would just really upset you. That's what it's saying in Genesis, but it doesn't really say that in English because they say it nicely. So Genesis has Jacob and all his sons lying to the prince that they will participate in this and give their daughters to them as long as they get circumcised, and they will become one people with them. And then Jacob's sons attack the city only after 3 days, because then they felt secure attacking the already slain. I mean, again, the character picture that is being portrayed is just profound. In Jubilees, Simon and Levi came unexpectedly to Shechem and executed judgment on all the men, and slew all the men they found, and not a single one was left. And they slew them in torments because of what they did to Dinah. Then the heavenly commentary in Jubilees is kind of interesting. It says, and thus let it not be done again from henceforth that a daughter of Yasharel be defiled. For judgment is ordained in heaven against them, that they should destroy with the sword all the men. And Yahuwah delivered them into the hands of the sons of Jacob, that they might exterminate them and execute judgment, that it might not thus again be done. And the books are so different. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's here in Jubilees that's not in Genesis. Look at this one. At this time, Levi was chosen for the priesthood because he was zealous to execute judgment upon all those who came against Yasharel. Does this remind you of Phineas or Pincus? I don't know how to pronounce his name. Sorry. The priest in the line of Aaron that received the covenant of peace, who also was zealous and executed judgment. And here is Levi, where the priesthood actually came from. It says Levi was chosen here for this reason, Okay, there's Jubilees goes on that there's Torah given by heavenly angels that the daughters must not be given to the Gentiles, else they will be burned with fire. This section is similar sounding to Leviticus, to the instructions for the priestly women and men. Prophecy is given to Moses by an angel that the people will not follow this Torah and hence will receive plagues, curses, and judgments. Do what? They will not do this. Believe it or not, it's just not in Genesis. That's why I just don't, I wanted to do this thing because there's just so many differences that I found. Okay, keep going. I'll finish with that story. Okay, the supposedly accurate testament of Levi has Levi stating that it was a sin for him to do this. What's up in here in this section? But Jubilees says nothing of the sort. So either one of these two books is right and the other one's wrong. Just about this point. I mean, none of these books are perfect. And the more I study, the more I see it. Okay, so lining up the two books continues to be difficult as they differ so much, yet for a few more chapters. But here we go. This is at trumpets. Jacob is telling his household to purify themselves and change their garments and get ready because they're going to go up and do an offering at Bethel. And okay. Oh yeah, Genesis says, "Go up there and make an altar to the God, who appeared to you when you fled from your brother Esau," as if it's a different God. I mean, this was really weird because in Jubilees, the altar already existed where they're going. It was already built. So I thought this was really an interesting difference. Okay, again we have Jacob burning and breaking into pieces the idols and destroying them. He didn't bury them under a tree. Okay. Jacob is sending word to his family, Isaac and Rebekah, that he's going to go to Bethel on trumpets and build the altar. But there's no mention in Genesis of him informing his family to come join him. In Jubilees, Jacob goes to his father Isaac, to his mother Rebekah, to the house of their father Abraham, and he took two of his sons with him. Now this is a really big difference, folks. So Isaac is taking Levi and Yehuda, and he takes them to Isaac and to Rebekah. And then this is chapter 31. So grandmother Rebekah spiritually recognizes, this is in Jubilees, the two sons Levi and Judah, and blesses them. Grandfather Isaac has his eyesight cleared and sees the sons, and the Ruach descends upon him, and he blesses extensively both Judah and Levi. Now I ask you to pray for discernment and the Ruach's guidance, and read this entire chapter and consider this in comparison to the fact that Jubilees does not record later the special blessings of Joseph's two sons. See, in the book of Genesis, a special blessing goes to Ephraim and Manasseh. But in Jubilees, that doesn't happen. There's a special blessing given to Judah and Levi. So they're really different. I'm going to keep going on. The next day, Jacob tells Isaac about the vow that he made and bids him to come to the sacrifice that he's going to do, but Isaac says he can't travel, take Rebekah. So Jacob goes to Bethel with his two sons, Levi and Judah, and Rebekah, and he does a sacrifice over the blessings, and he is excited because he has received his eternal security. Now you need to read this chapter. The blessing of Isaac, of Levi and Judah is recorded on the tablets of heaven as a witness. 31 is a key chapter in the Book of Jubilees. Okay, chapter 32, Benjamin is born in both of them. So see, I could line them back up here again in time. I mean, that's how I knew that chapter 31 fit here. You know, there's things that this is one of those places where I went, aha, I can line it back up again, because it was really hard to mesh these two books in some places. Okay, so Levi has dreams of his being ordained as a priest, and Jacob counts his sons backwards from the latest birth, and Levi is number 10. And this occurs only if Dinah is counted, by the way. The girls get counted. Okay, talk about that Benny word again, Bet Nun Yod. Okay, Yaakov pays his vows. He tithes 10%. This is where he tithes 10%. To Yah as a 7-day feast starting on the 15th in the 7th month. We're at Tabernacles. Okay, and he and his sons and his men were eating this with joy. There during 7 days in blessing and thanking Yah, who had delivered him out of all his tribulation and had given him his vow. Had given him his vow. Now, when you read about Jacob in the beginning of his story in Jubilees, before he sets out to Laban's, he tells Yah that if he will bring him safely back home to his father's house, that he will give him 10%. Okay, that's before he ever got anything. That is the vow that Jacob made. So here's Jacob, decades later, coming home safely to his father's house, and he's paying his vow. Okay. And he says that Yah had put that vow in his heart to do. Okay, so Levi discharged the office of priestess in Jubilees during the entire celebration in preference to his brothers. Okay, so Levi is already a priest here, long before supposedly the Levitical priesthood is chosen by Moses because of the golden calf. Levi is already the priest here in Jubilees. There's already Torah instructions on tithing. Jubilees dates the next events to the 8th day. Jacob sees a vision and is determined to build the place of the feast with walls and a court. So Yaakov wants to build a structure. This is the 8th day. And Yahuwah tells him not to do this. This is the Book of Jubilees. And it says, and Yahuwah appeared to him by night and blessed him and said, your name shall not be called Jacob, but Yasharel shall they name your name. Okay, this is where in the Book of Jubilees he is renamed on the 8th day after he paid his vow. Doesn't have anything to do with wrestling with an angel crossing the Jordan to go grovel to Esau. In Genesis, because I could line the two books up here, this is the second time in the book of Genesis he is renamed, because it says, God said to him, your name is Jacob, no longer your name shall be called Jacob, but your name Israel shall be your name. This is the second time in the book of Genesis. I thought that was really, really kind of interesting that a scribe had left that in there, that twice in Genesis he gets renamed. Okay, so the real thing to ponder here is on the timing of the new name. Is one rewarded for honoring your vows and doing what you say you're going to do? Or are you rewarded for having power over something and struggling in battle with something? Just a thought. Okay. So now the blessings come, more promises are made to Jacob. And in the book of Jubilees it says, and they shall judge everywhere, wherever their foot of the sons of men have trodden. It's talking about a seed. And I will give to your seed all the earth which is under heaven, and they shall judge all the nations according to their desires, and after that they shall get possession of the whole earth and inherit it forever. And all it says in Genesis is, I'm going to give you the land. This is a big difference here, folks. This deals with this prophetic difference, I would think, relevant to our times and how things are supposed to or going to be playing out. In the book of Jubilees, it continues. Now, this is not in Genesis at all. And he finished speaking with him, and he went up from him, and Jacob looked till he had ascended into heaven. So, Jacob is seeing Yah appeared to him. Now, it could be an angel, or some people believe that, Yahuwah, the Yahuwah in the Old Testament is Yahusha. I don't even want to go into that discussion. But just know that in the Book of Jubilees, Jacob is seeing who he just talked to and who just blessed him ascend up into heaven. And we're on the 8th day. And he saw in a vision of the night, and behold, a Malach descended from heaven with 7 tablets in his hand, and he gave them to Jacob, and he read them, and knew all that was written therein, which should befall him and his sons throughout all the ages. Where's that ever written about? Because if you read chapter 32, he goes on and he is told, he is given the Ruach so that he can remember this and write it down, but we don't have that. Okay, at this time, Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died, and they buried her beneath the city under the oak of the river, and he called the name of this place the River of Deborah, and the oak of mourning of Deborah. Now, when we study the feasts, I don't want to do a spoiler alert, but there's significance to this that we'll talk about when we get to the Feast of Tabernacles and the Great Eighth Day. Okay, there is a long 20 verses on the incident, complete with Torah and judgment. Now we're into chapter 33, where Reuben lays on his father's couch. He's with his concubine. There's only one verse about it in the book of Genesis, and there's 20 verses about it in the book of Jubilees. And it says, this is great sin, and don't do this. You're supposed to be a royal priesthood. You're supposed to be a holy nation. We don't do this kind of thing. In the book of Jubilees, it says that in the 3rd year of the 6th, in fact, let me go back. This disqualifies Reuben. Remember? From being the Yachid's son who gets the double portion. That's, we're talking about the incident where Reuben got disqualified himself. Okay, so in the 3rd year of the 6th week, Yaakov and all his sons went and dwelt in the house of Abraham, near Isaac his father and Rebekah his mother. That's not in Genesis. But the texts do line up again, because they give a recounting of all the 12 sons. So I could line it back up again to see what was missing. And it says, and they came and bound themselves to Isaac and Rebekah. And when they saw them, they blessed Yaakov and his sons. And Isaac rejoiced exceedingly, for he saw the sons of Jacob, his younger son, and he blessed them. And I just wondered to myself, is it possible Genesis copied this story and cast it into Joseph as a child? Because in Genesis there is an issue that he sees both the sun and the moon, mother and father, bowing to him, and yet she is dead when he is second in charge of Egypt, and she never does bow to him. But here in Jubilees, there is a story where everybody comes and bows to Isaac and Rebekah. That's the thing I'm trying to point out. Okay, chapter 34. Jacob and his sons are pasturing their sheep and servants in the pastures of Shechem. That's missing in Genesis. Jacob and his son fight 7 Amorite kings, who they and their men hid under trees to ambush them. Jacob wins the battle, and the sons chase the remnant back home, and they become a tributary to them, paying tribute to the sons until they went to Egypt during the famine. Again, this is not Genesis. And these were a couple chapters that were just way out of sync. Okay, here we go. The story I'm about to tell you that's in Jubilees comes later in Genesis at a different time. So here we have the story about Joseph to learn about the welfare of his brothers. This is Joseph. In the land of Shechem, and he found them in the land of Dothan. And the sons of Jacob slaughtered a kid, and dipped the coat of Joseph in the blood, and sent it to Jacob their father on the 10th of the 7th month. That's atonement, folks. The 10th day of the 7th month is when, in the book of Jubilees, Jacob is finding out and learning falsely that Joseph has been killed, and the sons are lying about it. So Jacob mourns for 1 year in the Book of Jubilees, and two women, Bilhah and Dinah, die immediately from grief and are buried. So there's Torah instruction in the Book of Jubilees given in detail on how to keep atonement every year in chapter 34. Then in chapter 35, there's an entire chapter of Torah given by Mother Rebecca to her son. That's missing, also from Genesis. I mean, it's just missing. These things are out of sync. Remember Proverbs 1, verse 8, "My son, hear the instruction of thy father, and forsake not the law of thy mother." It's Torah of thy mother. And here's a whole chapter of Torah by a mother being given to her son Jacob. Okay, in chapter 35, in Jubilees, Isaac admits to his wife, quote, "But I loved Esau formerly more than Jacob, but because he was the firstborn. But now I love Jacob more than Esau, for he has done manifold evil deeds, and there is no righteousness in him, for all his ways are unrighteousness and violence, and there is no righteousness around him." This is what Abraham already knew, and why Abraham blessed Jacob and told Rebekah, you got to make sure, Jacob's the one. And now Isaac actually admits it and realizes it, and goes on and says, "And now my heart is troubled because of all his deeds, and neither he or his seed are to be saved. For they are those who will be destroyed from the earth, and will be rooted out from under heaven. For he has forsaken Yah, the Almighty of Abraham, and gone after his wives, and after their uncleanness, and after their error, he and his children." Okay, goes on. "But if he desires to slay Jacob, his brother, into Jacob's hands will he be given, and he will not escape from his hands, for he will descend into his hands. And fear you not on account of Jacob, for the guardian of Jacob is great and powerful and honored and praised more than the guardian of Esau." There's some just prophetic things that are said all through this book that are just not in Genesis, and I think actually have a real importance for us to understand these days. Remember, I'm not the big prophecy person, but I understand blessings, and when the Ruach is speaking through people, you're supposed to pay attention. Okay, Rebekah gives a conditional blessing to Esau if he will refrain from evil, because she cares about Esau, and that you and Jacob will love each other, and that neither will desire evil against the other, but mutual love only, and so you will prosper, my sons, and be honored in the midst of the land, and no enemy will rejoice over you, and you will be a blessing and a mercy in the eyes of all those that love you. Talk about trying to teach brotherly love to her sons. And the rest of the chapter is the son's reply. Okay, Rebekah eats and drinks with her sons, and she died that night after they made promises to her. 5 years later, this is in the next chapter in Jubilees, Isaac calls his two sons to him and says he will die. Now, all this is missing from Genesis. Isaac has paragraphs of Torah instructions for his two sons, especially on brotherly love, and says, quote, "And if either of you devises evil against his brother, know that from henceforth every one that devises evil against his brother shall fall into his hand, and shall be rooted out of the land of the living, and his seed shall be destroyed from under heaven." The rest of that chapter and the rest of this stuff covers some end times prophecy. Isaac gives the double portion to firstborn Esau, who rejects it because he informs his father he sold his birthright to Jacob. Boy, is Jubilees telling the story differently than Genesis. Then Isaac eats and drinks with his sons and dies happy in the responses that his son gives him. In Genesis, there's only 3 verses of the entire story of this event. Okay, Leah dies and is buried, and the book details how much Jacob mourned for her, loved her, and what quality of character she had. Leah, and all that is missing from Genesis. They just don't care about women. Jubilees has a lot of stuff about women in it. Okay, there are 30 long verses of genealogy of Esau and all his descendants, and that's missing from Jubilees. But in Jubilees, there's an entire chapter on how Esau's sons and their father break many promises to their parents. Go and make war against Jacob and his sons, and Esau says he will never love Jacob unless some really bizarre, impossible conditions occur. I made a note to myself, watch for this in the End Times Deceptions, chapter 37. I think it's important because it's not in Genesis, but this was really some important information. Jacob kills Esau, and Esau's sons and warriors are defeated all the way to Mount Seir and put under servitude to the sons of Jacob, so that they paid tribute to Jacob and to his sons always. Okay, when you line up Jubilees in Genesis chronology with the telling of the kings of Edom that comes next, the story in Genesis becomes way off compared to Jubilees. Okay. Joseph has his dreams, brothers are jealous and sell him into slavery. This was told earlier in Jubilees, but see, this is where it is in Genesis. There's a payment to Tamar for the harlot's fee and two goats by the hand of a shepherd in Jubilees, and only one goat in Genesis. And I thought, when did I hear about two goats? That's in the scripture in the Tanakh for atonement, the two goats. And here's two goats in Jubilees. And two women died on the Day of Atonement. Two women died because of grief over the lying that the sons did to their father. Okay. Next thing here that's not in Genesis, it says in Jubilees, and thereupon the 7 years of fruitfulness were accomplished, of which Joseph spoke to Pharaoh. So that's not in Genesis. There was Torah on the uncovering of skirts. That's not in Genesis. What's in Genesis is the birth of twins, Pharez and Zerah, who were first and second. That's not in Jubilees. Now I can line the things back up, see, in chapter 39, because Joseph is avoiding the Potiphar's wife. Okay. Okay. Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, and without your consent no one shall lift up his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt. That's not in the Book of Jubilees. What is in the Book of Jubilees, however, in chapter 39, is it says, and Joseph ruled over all the land of Egypt, and all the princes of Pharaoh, and over all his servants, and all who did the king's business loved him. For he walked in uprightness, and he walked without pride and arrogance, and he had no respect of persons, and did not accept gifts, but he judged in uprightness and all the people of the land. So the good things, again, this is, not necessarily character assassination. We're just going to leave out all the good stuff about somebody, so you don't really know them. Later on, it says that in the land of Egypt was all at shalom before Pharaoh because of Joseph. For Yah was with him and gave him favor and mercy for all his generations before all those who knew him and those who heard concerning him. And Pharaoh's kingdom was well ordered, and there was no Satan, no adversary, and no evil person therein. Now I thought that was quite a statement. I didn't know how I wanted to believe that one or not, that there's no evil person therein, but that is what the text says. This is why I wish we all could get the Book of Jubilees at its source and not just in English. And the king called Joseph's name, I don't know how to pronounce this, and gave Joseph to wife the daughter of Potiphar, the daughter of the priest of Heliopolis, the chief cook. This is the daughter of the priest for sun god worship. So Joseph's wife, is the daughter of a priest. She's in a priestly family. So Joseph is marrying into a priestly family. So Manasseh and Ephraim would have been influenced by Egyptian worship. I hope from Heliopolis. There's a lot that you could say about that, but just realize that the Book of Jubilees, you can kind of connect those dots. Okay, so then what's in Genesis after this is the the let's see, before the year of famine came, two sons were born to Joseph. Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, that's a big thing to research out, bore them to him. Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh, for he said, God has made me forget all my hardships and all my father's house. Did we really think that Joseph forgot his father's house? Next verse, the name of the second he called Ephraim, for God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. Okay, I haven't done word studies on these two names yet, but probably should. Overall, the story of the brothers getting grain and going back and forth and being tested is much the same, but there is much more detail in Genesis than there is in Jubilees. Jacob, this was in chapter 44. Jacob leaves Haran and goes to the well of the oath and makes an offering and prays for guidance and waits 7 days. He has the vision and celebrates the feast of Shavuot. And the next day he has a vision from Yah that he can go to Egypt and not to fear. Do you realize that he's there at the feast of Shavuot? He's been praying and fasting for guidance, and Yah makes him a promise right at the time that oaths are made and says it's okay to go because your family's going to come back. I think that is interesting. You don't understand that in the book of Genesis. Okay, so Jacob goes and meets Pharaoh, and he's blessed by Pharaoh, and Pharaoh gives him and his family permission to settle in Goshen. That's not in Jubilees. Joseph does not purchase the land. Joseph does not purchase the land of the priests, as they are all on allowance from Pharaoh. That would mean the Levites get a pass, which is not in Jubilees. What is in Jubilees, it says, Jacob blesses Yah for bringing him to see his son and for being true to the vision that he said at Bethel, the well of the oath. Joseph and his brothers eat bread and drink wine with their father. Bread and wine. Interesting. You get the final blessings from Jacob. And in Genesis it says in verse 22 of a chapter, moreover, I have given to you, rather than to your brothers, one mountain slope that I took from the hand of the Amorites with my sword and with the bow. Now, when you study this out, there's only one place that you ever see that there was a battle with the Amorites, and that's in the book of Jubilees. So Genesis is referencing an existing, already written book of Jubilees. It's telling you something that you only find out in the book of Jubilees. Okay, chapter 44 in Jubilees. And Yasharel blessed his sons before he died, and he told them everything that would befall them in the land of Egypt. Everything. They knew ahead of time what was going to happen. And he made known to them what would come upon them in the last days. And blessed them, and gave to Joseph 2 portions of land. This is Joseph in Jubilees getting the double portion. Joseph did. And he gave all his books, and all the books of his fathers to Levi. So Jubilees is recording that Levi would have already known. Levi was the priest already, remember? And he's gotten all the books. All the way back from Enoch. He already knows Torah. That Levi and his sons might preserve them and renew them for the children unto this day. Okay, in the book of Genesis, we get Yasharel, Jacob, blessing his 12 sons via cryptic, poetic prophecy about their future. Yaakov blesses Ephraim and Manasseh and skips Joseph, which differs from Jubilees. It says, so he blessed them that day, saying, by you Israel will pronounce blessings, saying, God make you as Ephraim and Manasseh. That's not in Jubilees. What was in Jubilees, if you remember, was the blessing of Judah and Levi at length by Isaac. Okay, chapter 46 still. And it came to pass that after Jacob died, the children of Yasharel multiplied in the land of Egypt, and they became a great nation. And they were of one accord in heart, so that brother loved brother, and every man helped his brother. And they increased abundantly and multiplied exceedingly. 10 weeks of years, all the days of the life of Joseph. And there was no Satan, no adversary, nor any evil in all the days of the life of Joseph, which he lived after his father Jacob. For all the Egyptians honored the children of Yasharel all the days of the life of Joseph. Okay, Genesis has details of the embalming of the body and a funeral procession. It has Joseph reconciling and forgiving his brothers. Those things are not recounted in Jubilees. Jubilees gives the historical background information and details on a war between Egypt and Canaan that shed much light on why the slavery came to the people of Yasharel after Joseph dies, and that's missing in Genesis. The suspect Book of Jasher, which has been disproved as a fraud under lots of research by the God culture, which you can prove out for yourself, gives an entirely different reason for the slavery that befell the people of Yasharel. Okay, so we're at the end. So I hope you have enjoyed this video and this summary today. Yes, it is long, but it is worth it. Sometimes you just have to buckle down and study, and you have to put in the time required to learn and grow. I challenge all of you to take this document, the Book of Jubilees and Genesis, and compare them for yourself. Don't be fooled by teachers telling you there's nothing to see here, or it's all just the same. It's just another little Genesis. We have one teacher who will lead us into truth. And I am sharing with you my study notes. I'm a student just like you are, a sister sharing some Cliff Notes, hoping to help others still learning like me. So nudge, nudge from your sister. This is a book to check out and ponder the differences for sure. If you like studying in a group and want to study Jubilees chapter by chapter with us, please email me at the address on the screen, and I will add you to the list for an upcoming group that will be studying this book. We will be doing so in a private platform that we're setting up for in-depth studies and the Paleo-Hebrew teachings. Oh yes, I have a chart and lots of study notes to share with you there too. On this is a summary from almost 250 pages of notes, where I went line by line comparing the books, and I wrote in a lot of Paleo-Hebrew insights and information that's not in this video. I can't share everything with you today. It's already a minute and an hour and 35 minutes long. So may Yah bless you and increase the light and the flame and burning inside of you. Shalom. Oh, please like and comment on this video. Please click like and comment so that other people on YouTube will eventually see this video. Shalom.